Hi and welcome to Kegels and Coffee. My name is Isabel and I'm your host. I met Angie through my husband Pata when I came to Cornudella my very first time. Originally from the US, she started doing the double life back and forth between the US and Spain over 20 years ago when she met her partner climbing here in Ciurana. In the US, she would hustle and constantly be on the move working as a professional photographer. In Spain, they would live a very simple, quiet, off-the-grid, and quite isolated lifestyle. In our conversation, Angie explains how at first she didn't really see how those two lives would work together, but later started realizing that her quiet life in Spain actually complemented her fast-paced rhythm in the US. We talk about our creative process as artists and the importance of stopping. We dive into why we create things, what they mean to us, and the importance of connecting with others. Recently retired, Angie is now living full-time on her little piece of heaven, tucked up against the Montsant, off-grid, collecting rainwater, eating from her own garden, and baking her homemade bread, which is so delicious. She gives us a glimpse into her day-to-day life and how over the years she learned what having enough means to her. Enjoy.
No, seriously, what am I doing with my life?
How did that come across? Did they hear me?
I feel like I'm losing my fucking mind.
You're messed up.
I need to just Netflix and chill.
Like I'm gonna meditate like a badass.
It's just like this psychotic break, and then I get my period, and I'm like, oh, it was just your period again.
Am I the only one feeling this crazy? And I'm going to just make sure I'm recording. And I am. It's always this thing where you're like, okay, just make sure you actually hit record. And I'm telling you right now, I did. And it's counting.
Okay, cool.
Because that only has happened to me once.
But it can happen.
It can happen.
You know, I have
can
I have gone to
happen.
work and left one of my lenses behind. I have gone to work and forgotten the camera. I have gone to work and then had a computer crash and had erased everything that I had recorded that day.
Oh my God.
So, I mean,
that's
shit happens.
It shit happens. And it's like, especially when you're working with technology, I think it's like such an interesting thing because if you're doing oil painting and you're like, oh, I forgot to buy like blue, you know, it's like one thing. But if you're a photographer or like recording a podcast,
it's happening in the moment. Sometimes there's no redo. Sometimes there is, but sometimes there just isn't. And it's like, okay, we went on location. These people spent a whole bunch of time and money getting everything ready. They arranged it with their schedule, with the company or with like their client or whatever. And guess what? I fucked up.
It happens.
It's only happened to me twice in 43 years of working. So thank God for that.
I think that's pretty good.
Yeah. Could have been worse. A lot worse. But I mean, I think part of my wanting to not work anymore was getting to the point where it was a hardship for me to go to work rather than a pleasure. And it had started out as a pleasure. And when it got to that point, I was like, fuck this.
I can so relate to that. I feel like that's a little bit what happened with Ascendance Project for me, where the fire and the inspiration that you always felt, which was like the driving force to do something that, you know, maybe is a kind of a more unconventional life path, suddenly is not there. And you're like, why am I hustling and bustling like this? You know?
And it's also, for me, part of it had to do with what happened in the States with Trump. I mean, with the election, with cycles of change, and with everybody moving towards this more conservative worldview. And people who I'd worked for years and years and years started getting so uptight about like their piece of the pie, and everybody started to get so protective of themselves that they would start to step on me, who was their ally and had been working with them forever, you know. And then when people get like that, you feel like, what's the point? If I can't help them move out of that space and all they're going to do is drag me into it, I don't want to be there.
Yeah.
I don't want to live that way, and that's not an okay place to be. And I can understand, because I'm, you know, in some ways I'm older than some of my clients were, and they're at a stage in their life when they still have to kind of like grasp for things because they're more afraid of losing things. And I'm at this point in my life where I'm like, okay, I'm doing all right. I have enough. That's it. I only need enough. I don't need more.
Right. I know that's like such a European, I feel like European attitude, like enough versus like more. And, the culture in the US definitely encourages to have extra.
Well, extra if you need it for survival because you need that cushion is one thing. Extra because it somehow elevates you socially, or extra because having more makes you more important and other people like you more if you have more. It's like, I can't go there.
Yeah.
I mean, I never really have been that person. And when it got to the point where everything around me was going more and more in that direction, it just got ugly. I mean, it got sad.
Right. This is so interesting. I had this whole idea of how I'm going to start this conversation, but we're just like diving right in.
Yeah, we're there.
I think we're there. I'm like, let's talk about the lion and this and that, and we'll get to everything. But now that we're there, I actually want to sort of stop and give you a moment to briefly describe a little bit what the last years have looked like for you, because one of the things, obviously, I want to talk about today that we've talked about very often is the back and forth life, because we both have been doing it, US, Spain. And both of us are artists. And we talked about how, that because you were just kind of diving into the cultural difference or differences. When you land in Spain, something happens at first where it's like, oh wow, it's like quiet, it's silent, especially here where you live, right? So I wanna backtrack to the back and forth over the last years, being a photographer in the US and then coming here, because you said something the other day that really impacted me on how when you first landed, it was like, holy shit, it's so quiet.
Yeah, well, I started coming here 23 years ago. So it's been a while. And it sort of all kind of grew out of having met my partner climbing and then gone back to the States and had my parents aging. And I was living with my aging parents and taking care of them and coming to Spain as kind of like a break from my work life and my responsibilities as a kid taking care of parents. I mean, I had other people helping, so I could afford to walk away and let somebody else take care of them for a while. But coming back here was my refuge. It was my way of sort of trying to get perspective on the roller coaster that I was on. And so the back and forth became going there, speeding up, jumping into my responsibilities, taking care of the things I needed to take care of, gritting my teeth, going to work, making money, doing all the things that I needed to do at that stage of my life, which were important. It's not like they were worthless. They were very important things, but it was not sustainable on an endless basis. So when I would come back here, at first it was like, oh, it's so quiet. It's too quiet. What do I do with myself? I don't know how to handle this. This is too much. And then I would like take a day, or maybe it would take me 2 days, and the volume would get turned way down, and I would just be able to breathe, and I would just stop fretting. And one of the things that was happening initially was I was always feeling like this is unsustainable. This can't work. How can this possibly work? I'm going to have to make a choice. I'm going to have to be there doing that, or I'm going to have to be here because at some point I realized nothing was broken. Nothing needed fixing. What I needed to do was just to relax and let both things have their place in my life and both things show me their value. And when I got to that point, it didn't mean that when I got back there, I wasn't still like revving up and going, like a bat out of hell. But it meant that I could enjoy both the pace of being a working person, a person taking care of other people, that life, and also enjoy the part where you come here and you spend, an hour and a half just looking at the landscape, or just being in the garden, or cooking a meal, but not like cooking a meal like I just go and buy a bunch of stuff at the supermarket, but I've grown it, I've gone and I've picked it, now I'm cleaning it, now I'm making up a recipe, and 3.5 hours later, we're sitting down to lunch. It's a completely different perspective on the things that are like daily activities in your life. And one of the other things that I noticed was going back to the States. I mean, when first we're coming here, it was just like the house was a shack. We didn't have electricity. We didn't have much of anything. We had a toilet and we had running water. That was it. The kitchen was no running water. We didn't have any electric lights at night. And you start to kind of live as if you're living in like the 19th century. And then when you go back to the States, you flip a switch and it's a freaking miracle.
Oh, I know. Everything is a miracle there. Everything.
But you don't take it for granted. The people that are around you, the friends that you have there, they still don't understand what they have because to them it's a day in, day out event. And so the appreciation that you gain for what technology is and what we have that are creature comforts that have been given to us by our own development, by human progress, as it were. It's a wonderful thing, but there's also another side to that. If you don't appreciate it, you don't take care of it, you take it for granted, you become extremely wasteful with it.
Yeah, the wasteful. That is such an interesting and important aspect, I think, of what you're mentioning, because another thing that I wanted to sort of at some point dive into a little bit is here we are sitting on your deck on this beautiful piece of land tucked up against Montsant. And I was hoping for you to give just like a little short glimpse into your life here, and you kind of already have started. And it obviously sounds like you've come a long way, but yet you're living off grid. You are collecting rainwater in $50,000. Look at me. I'm like, money. No, 50,000 liter tanks. You have a garden. You live off your own land. You make your own bread. And yeah, tell us a little bit more about just like what that looks like. And because we're just talking about, just having all the luxuries and then being here. But it's still something really beautiful because it is a luxury in another way. Like I feel like luxury, but a different definition of luxury.
I agree. I think that's a very good way of seeing it. For me, the things that I do and the way that I live are more than anything out of a necessity rather than out of some political statement or some I don't have an agenda with how I live. I'm not trying to convince anyone that this is the right way. It's just right for me because basically I'm lazy. And for me, it's easier to make bread at home than it is to go to the village to buy it. Seriously.
That's one way of looking at it.
It is.
And you enjoy doing it.
And I love being at home. I love being at home.
Yes.
For us, when we go to Reyes, it's like we're going to the big city to go shopping. And it's an exhausting day for us.
Oh my
to
God,
leave.
that's so funny because I actually recorded that in my solo episode about the days in Reyes and Tarragona, and you come back and you're like,
yeah. Just the turning down of the volume that I learned about when I was coming back and forth from the States also happens on a daily basis for me now. And one of the real key parts to that was when the pandemic struck and we're up here. I was actually scheduled to go back to the U.S. and I had I think it was the Thursday before they shut everything down here in Spain, and I had a ticket for a Friday, and I canceled that airplane ticket. And I thought, if I go back to the States now to work, first of all, highly unlikely that anything's going to happen with work because I had all this work lined up, and I thought, no, this is not a 2-week thing. This is going to take a little longer than that. So I canceled that ticket, and thank God I did, because had I gone back to the States and been stuck there without health insurance,
oh my God,
in a house that, granted, I didn't live in a city, but how was I going to get food? If I got sick, how was I going to get taken care of? So that was a really good decision. And then so walking out after everything got shut down, the level of peace and quiet was so profound that it made me think, okay, it's really time for me to retire because I want to live like this.
This is what I want. And this is another thing I was going to ask you today is you've been doing the back and forth for so many years. And so have I. And serendipitously, both of us decided this past year, I think more or less around the same time, more or less, to make this our home base for different reasons. You have decided to retire, and I really want Spain to be my home base. But is that something that you had been looking forward to for a while, or it sounds like a little bit during COVID, it became more clear to you that you were done with the back and forth?
It crystallized.
Yeah.
I thought I wanted to continue to work until I was a full retirement, at least. And also at some point in my life, I had thought, well, with the kind of work that I do, I can really work for a long time. It's not so physical that I can't continue to work. Mm-hmm. But the combination of how people were behaving in the States and how I was feeling as I aged that I wasn't anticipating, like having hip surgery and having things happen to my body that I kind of didn't expect, it sort of sped it up. I had never said, oh, I'm going to retire at this age. I had just said, I'm just going to keep going and see how it goes.
Right.
And then as I kept going and I saw how it went, I didn't like where it was going.
Yeah.
And so the pandemic and the stopping of everything and the permission for everything to stop. And it wasn't just me, it's everybody else. You know, for some people, it was a very difficult time because they were trapped and they had kids and they couldn't go to school. I mean, there's a whole bunch of gray area to people's lives around the pandemic. For some people, it was greatly inconvenient or highly a lot of suffering. For me, my life didn't change hardly at all because I already live off the grid.
You actually were probably happy about it.
It
in some
was
ways because
a joy.
Yeah.
There was no sound. There was no airplanes flying overhead. There was no tractors coming up the road. It was peace and
quiet. Which is hilarious. Can I just please point that out, Angie? You're like, there were no airplanes flying around. There was no tractor coming up the thing. Honestly, every time I come up here, it is so freaking quiet and peaceful. Like, we're doing this right now on your deck, and there's like some birds in the background. And yes, a tractor just came by. We heard them. But I've never even actually heard an airplane. I know they're up there, but I'm like, it is already so quiet and peaceful. And you're like, no. During COVID, it was like another level of quiet and peaceful. And I can't even imagine that right now.
But that's also something that I've heard from people who live in the city. Like in D.C., friends of mine in D.C. were saying, I could walk down the middle of Connecticut Avenue because there was no traffic on the road. It was so quiet. There was no planes in the air. Now, granted, you're in a city and there's always going to be a certain level of background noise. And here there's also background noise. But it was noticeably different. And it was energetically different. It's almost as if everybody had just kind of like quieted down.
Yeah.
And so for us, we just had, life just went on. We had, fortunately, when we knew it was coming, because they had said, we were locking down next week, my partner went and bought a whole bunch of food and went to Reyes. Only person masked in the entire supermarket, being looked at like he was an alien, and bought a whole bunch of food. We didn't have to leave the house again until, I think it was April. And this was, I think, beginning of March. Yeah. And the only thing we needed to do in April was go down to the village and get some asthma medicine for my partner. And then the rest of the time, we didn't shop again until June.
That's crazy. And I mean, like you said, you have a lot of stuff also that you live off your own garden. And you were saying earlier that what we're about to have for lunch, I can't wait for lunch. You're like, yeah. Can you just tell me again, please?
Yes, I have some crema de calabacín, which is basically squash soup frozen from last year in the freezer. And I fried up some potatoes that are from my garden and some onion from my garden, some green onions from my garden, and some vegan sausage, which is really good. It's a chorizo, and I'll tell you the brand because it's really good stuff. And that's all fried up and added to my crema de calabacín, and I made fresh bread this morning. So we're going to have lunch later.
Oh, I love your bread so much. I have to, every time you give me a loaf, I have to cut it in half, freeze most of it, because I just don't stop eating it.
I know. We've had that problem. There has been moments in time when fresh loaf comes out, if I make it in the evening, and we just sit down and eat the whole thing, and when we look at each other and think, okay, what have we just done?
Oh, it's so good. Before we jump into more stuff, I really want to get into the photography and the creative process and talk a little bit more about the back and forth. But I want to wrap up land stuff because we do live in a place where there has been an ongoing drought. And water is definitely more and more and more becoming a major issue.
Oh, yes.
And so I'm just blown away. And granted, you've been collecting water in those 50,000 liter tanks for a long time. And you have several of them. But still, it's so crazy how you said the other day, just in one day of rain, how much water you actually get to collect. And that for you, it's not an issue. And I know people have different approaches, right? There is the collecting of the rain in the tanks. Some people drill pozos, they go down and drill and see if they can find groundwater. And then some people have decided to just buy tanks and have water delivered. And we're talking about people that don't live, on the grid in the village, that are not connected to water and electricity. So it sounds like to me, your system is sort of it's more, it feels like more bulletproof, like in some ways, right?
Well, in some ways, we had no other choice. First of all, the way the land is here, the higher up you go on the mountain, the harder it is to get water out of the ground. There's still some places. I mean, this is limestone, so there's all kinds of underground water. But it's hard to find, and it's expensive to drill.
Right, it's very expensive.
Yeah.
That's the other thing, the costs.
Yeah. There is a well here, but the well's dry. I mean, I think I've seen a little, it's, I think, 8 meters deep, and I've only seen a little bit of water in that well one time.
Well, and if it keeps getting worse, then
you
people are
can't
going to
depend
keep
on it.
having to go further and further and further.
You can't depend on it, and if
Yeah.
it stops raining altogether, we're all screwed.
Yeah.
Let's face it. So basically, our approach has always been collect rainwater off of all of our roofs, have various tanks that are in different places. So we've got a very large 50,000 liter one that collects all of the roof water from all of the structures that we have. That's the central collection. From there, I pump to one that's 30,000. That's for my garden use, but also like a backup if one of them goes dry. And then the other one is above the house, and it's a 25,000 liter. And that one we pump up to so that we have gravity fed water pressure for the house and for, the upper parts. But basically, we just, every time we build something that's like a shed, or it's a chicken house, or it's the mechanic pit roof, all of that stuff just gets added on into the water collection system.
Yeah.
And so, for every liter of rain that falls, we can collect almost 250 liters of water.
That's incredible.
So it doesn't have to rain much for us to be able to collect water, but it has to rain.
Yeah.
And
yeah, and like
just
fingers
tough.
crossed, I'm going to knock on wood over here, just because I just want to feel hopeful that the pattern will change.
Well, it is normal for us to have drought cycles here. The difference that now with climate change is that our cycles are getting more severe. So when we have rainy seasons, we can have deluge. And when we have dry, we can have severe drought.
Right.
And it's usually 3 or 4 year cycles. So hopefully, this being the third year and the end of, I think, La Nina, maybe we'll get rain this year because we so need it.
We so need it.
I mean, I can collect water and I can water my garden, but the plants know the difference between what falls from the sky and what I give them from a tank that has somehow, it's fallen from the sky before. But it just doesn't.
It's not the same. And also
same.
just the whole environment is changing. Yeah. You can tell, like, the other days, like, I was talking to a friend who also has a garden, and she was talking about, and you mentioned this, insects and mosquitoes, they're all confused and they're coming, and like suddenly something is sprouting and shouldn't be, and like all these patterns that are just kind of occurring because of the heat. And I would also personally just love some rain because I love the sun. But I think that's the German in me. Like the other day when we did have that stormy day, it was so cozy.
So nice.
And I just love looking outside. I'm like working on my computer in the loft, just watching the rain come down. It felt so nice.
I love it. And I also like walking in the rain.
I know,
just
me
like,
too. And it's like hitting your skin and it's all humid and stuff. And everything here smells like the pine, and everything starts smelling, and the ground starts, like all the herbs, everything just becomes so rich and yummy.
Yeah, and also the stuff that's in the air that's not pollution. There's when the Sahara has sandstorms, those sandstorms get blown out into the ocean, and the air currents will bring the sand over Spain. And when it rains, what they call mud rains, but what it's really doing is it's depositing minerals from the Sahara in my garden. And to me, that's just so exciting to think, oh my God, everything that comes from the sky is bringing nutrients with it for the plants. And so when all this stuff dries up, some plants are kind of hanging on, but they're hanging on. They're barely hanging on. They're not thriving.
Yeah. Yeah, because I've seen, I follow you on Instagram, and you do a lot of, obviously you are a photographer, but you, on your personal account, love to, share your garden and like your vegetables and your harvesting and your cooking, and that's always colorful and rich and beautiful and just like yummy. And I understand that for you especially, it's such, you can really tell the difference. Like things are still working, but like you said, it's like the plants aren't thriving. There's a difference when tomatoes are just like going crazy and when they're just kind of barely making it by, right?
Yeah, we're getting by, but it'd be nice for everything in the landscape to have a break from this. And maybe this year. I'm hoping this year.
I'm hopeful.
Well, so far, I've been keeping rain records since 2012, I think, or 10. This January's had more rain than the last 2 years. So that's a good sign.
That's
a good
sign.
start.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll see.
Okay, so going back to artists, to photography, to the creative process. The other day when we were talking, you said that, you know, in the back and forth, like you land here, it's suddenly so quiet and you're like, whoa, like too quiet, you know, but also it kind of led to us talking about the creative process and how breaks are important and how stopping is important and observing is important, no matter what the creative process is, you know, whether it's dance or music or photography or any creation. And because I think one of the things I was saying to you that day is like, I just feel stuck and, you know, I haven't been putting out with a podcast in my life and just, you know, career wise, I'm moving here. What am I doing? And all this stuff. And you kind of went into the importance of stopping. And I remember clearly how you said that when you would land here and you're, you know, running around in the U.S. just like busy and working and taking photos and tons of clients and all the projects, and you would come here and just stop and stare. You know, I think there's actually a poem, "What is life if I can't stop and stare?" I feel like my grandma loved that poem. I can't remember, but anyways, it just reminds me of that. But you said you would sit and suddenly you see, or because you're just, you know, letting your eyes relax, how the sun hits the chair and casts the shadow, and suddenly there's your shot. But it's like it comes from non-doing. Another example you had was I'm cooking and the light comes through the kitchen suddenly and it hits the food and the color is just like on fire of the food from my garden, and like there's an inspiration. I would love for you to talk a little bit about that, because it was such a contrast to come here, but then you said it is really important to have that.
It is really important. And the creative process is, I mean, if you're a person who is an artist by nature, which you are and I am, it never leaves. You just have,
damn it.
You have these different gears,
right,
that you have to be able to function in order for those things to become available to you. And the gear that's the high gear when I'm in the States, when I used to go and work and do all that stuff, it wasn't like I wasn't bringing a creative part of myself to that. It was just a different gear. It was a different perspective. It had to do with solving problems for other people. It had to do with, you know, being respectful and being attentive to the needs of somebody who's hired you to do something. And it's a service. And when I would come here, I would have a different ability to give myself that service. And that wasn't available to me when I was so busy. And over the years, you know, I started out in art school, and then I got out of art school and I had skills as a photographer and I had to eat. So I started just doing commercial work because I could. It was the only skill I had. I didn't know what else to do. And as part of the process, you know, in art school, it's like, oh, you're going to be selling out if you go to work for somebody else and yada, yada, yada. No, There's range to all of that stuff. So for me, it was like, okay, you go there, you work, you do all that stuff, but you don't have time for yourself. You're solving problems for other people, but your job, and you have to take it seriously because that's the ethics of being somebody who's working, is you take care of the people that you're working for.
Your clients, yeah.
Yeah, you do right by them. You don't stomp your feet and say, I'm the artiste and I'm going to do it my way. You know, right. It's a give and a take. And coming here was the opportunity to take that time back to myself the way I had when I was starting out. And that was something that I didn't really realize I could do until I had the stillness, until I had the moment to breathe. And for me, part of it was my dad died in 2007. And I had just bought some new cameras because, you know, digital was one of those things that was beginning to become really good instead of just kind of almost not useful. And I had bought a new camera, and I'd bought a macro lens kind of on a whim because it was something that I used to really like to do. And I thought, oh, I'll have a macro lens. I don't need it for work, but I'll just take it to Spain. And then I went out into the fields and I started looking at things through that lens. And it was like diving.
Oh, wow.
It was like leaving
a different world.
Completely. Because I'm getting older. My eyesight's not as great as it was. I can't see the things that I'm photographing with my naked eye. I can only see them through that lens. So I would just go into the camera and I would start floating around the landscape and seeing and discovering. And boy, that was like...
It's like you lose yourself.
It was a completely new body of work. It was totally unexpected. I wasn't doing it because I thought, now I'm going to do personal work. No, it grew out of the stillness, out of the color, out of the environment, out of the things that grow here, out of the things that live here that I so connect with because I love nature. I love plants. Mountains are beautiful. Plants. My thing has always been plants. And so that's why I garden. And this comes from when I was very young because I used to do that with my dad. And that's the kind of the beauty of that full cycle was that this work came for me right after my father died. And my relationship to the natural world comes from my relationship with my dad.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So those two things just, when I saw that happening, it was so easy for me to dive in because it opened itself up for me.
Yeah.
And then the work that came out of that, I was a commercial photographer. I was like working with interior designers. I was an interiors photographer. So when I started doing this work, I started showing it to my clients because I was so excited about doing it. And they'd look at that and they go, oh, hey, I've got this dentist's office and I need art for the walls. And I was just wondering do you think? And I'm like, sure. Because I'm thinking, a dentist's office? Who goes to a dentist's office? How do you feel when you're sitting in the waiting room of the dentist's office? You're worried, you're anxious. Nobody likes the dentist.
No.
Nobody likes going to have their teeth drilled. So what better place for that work to be on the wall to provide a little bit of what I feel when I'm here to the person sitting in that office? I was thrilled for that stuff to be put into a dentist's office and later into a clinic. And, it just became a natural part of where that work was going and generating an income. So I thought, okay, fine. If this is going to start making money without my even trying.
It was sincere. It just happened naturally. Yeah. And that's like going back to the process is like just having that trust also, right? Like you're losing yourself through this lens in a different world and it's captivating you. You're being sincere. You're being honest. You're following something that's calling your attention, right? Like I feel like for me, that's always the thing is like if I don't feel it, then I can't force it. And if it's there, it makes itself very apparent. And the timing of it, like just having, the patience for things to occur, and then the relaxed mind to wander into nature with your lens and without thinking about the outcome, not without judging what it may or may not become, and also without a schedule.
Right. I didn't put anything in front of it. It put itself in front of me.
Right. And that's exactly it. It just puts it, oh my gosh, that resonates so hard because, my life has been a bit of a shit show. I was laughing with my friend and mentor, Stephen Dimmitt, because he's my podcast mentor. And I was like, I've been silent for months and months. I've been moving. I've been coming here. I've been trying to organize my life and downsize in the U.S. and trying to figure out what my life is going to look like here, work-wise, all the things. And so podcast was not on the radar. I mean, it was just, like you said, it wasn't putting itself in front of me. And it's not something I can force. Like either I feel inspired to create, to record, to share, or I don't. And if I don't, it's like, the recorder is just like sitting in the corner. And months had passed and it's interesting because it was our conversation up here, one of our mini conversations, sitting up on your deck and talking, where I was like, I really freaking wish I was recording right now. And I had been, coming up with some ideas about my podcast and what it could look like now that I live here and English is not the first language, and like what if I threw in some other languages. And anyways, I had started to feel that spark again, which was such a nice feeling. That. Yeah. That's like the funnest one, right? Yeah. Because then comes the work. But like that first kind of thing where you're just like, ooh. And it's like, and that's okay. It's okay that I had to let it sit. But it's hard for me to give myself, I think, that grace when in the culture that I believe you and I both grew up in, US, and for me also Germany, like you're not raised to believe that you can trust the process, that you can let things unfold. That's not like part of my upbringing.
Yeah, well, we're supposed to do things.
Yeah,
we're not supposed
to make things,
things, and there's a responsibility attached to that. Otherwise, you're lazy or you're shiftless or you're not doing enough. You're not, and the process, the unfolding of the process it's work and pleasure at the same time, and we're not conditioned to accept that those things can be both true simultaneously. Mm-hmm. And part of what I think both where you and I both are in our lives is that you have enough experience in your life of having done these things that you know now how to do them in some ways effortlessly. And so when the opportunity presents itself, when something opens up, it's not like I didn't have to learn how to do photography and use a camera in order to be able to make those photographs. I already knew how to use the tool. So when the tool became second nature, the thing that became pure was the experience of the doing of it, the seeing of the thing, the creating of the moment, the interacting with the moment. It's people have said, oh, you capture this, or the language that's used around photography for me sometimes I find it very, it's deceptive. For me, it's not that I am creating something or making something. It's that it's passing through me. Mm-hmm. And the only reason it can do that is because the tools are already second nature.
Yes.
And I think for you, it's the same thing. It's like, oh, I wish I was recording this, but you already know how to use the equipment. Yeah. You already know what to do. If you want to move in some way, you already have years of dance experience. So you already know, your body already knows how to express what you're feeling. And that's the beauty of being older doing these kinds of things. It's like, oh. And I remember when I was really just starting out, I had done my first body of work, and there's an energy that goes with that sort of stuff. You get all excited, and then it wanes, and you think, oh my God, am I ever going to be able to do this again? Was this a one-off? Was this just a lucky thing that happened, and now I feel so drained and like I couldn't even pick up a camera and do anything if I tried, and oh my God, what's to become of me, or what's going to happen?
I just referred to my podcast to a shriveled up prune the other day with a friend. I'm like, what's going on with your podcast? Like, yeah, that's just kind of dry and shriveled up sitting over there.
Yeah.
Anyways,
what it's doing is it's taking the break that you need to take in order to be able to come at it with another perspective.
Exactly.
And that's what coming back and forth between the States and here did for me. That's exactly what it was. I'd come back here and I would be able to re-energize in a way that when I went back there, I was better at doing what I did because I wasn't in the rut that you're in when you can't stop. You have to keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. And some people can work that way. I can't. I need the downtime.
Amen.
And so, if you know enough about yourself and who you are, and you have the opportunity, which let's face it, we're freaking blessed to be able to be here. It's a privilege.
Yeah.
But it's a privilege that's also come from hard work. It's not like,
it's
oh my
not
God,
like
it didn't fall out of the sky.
Yeah, it doesn't. Exactly. That's the other thing. It is a privilege, and I'm very grateful for it. Every aspect of my life that contains like the creative process. Like for many years it was dance. Now it's podcast. I started teaching yoga. Like all of that is something that I know I'm very privileged to be experiencing, but I also really freaking work hard for it.
You work for it.
It's not like it just happens. It's like, and it's scary, and you're in the moment, but also, obviously you're trying to do good work, and it becomes like you, even though it's not you, and everything that we're just talking about, like I know all that. And it's like you said, having been an artist for so many years now, I understand, I comprehend, which is why I'm glad, I have you in my life, because you remind me of things that I already know, but that I forget. So it's like, I know all that. I know I needed the break. I know things will emerge in their own time. I trust that. I know with dance, it was always waves and cycles and ebbs and flows, and you can't force creation of something that wants to be born and something that wants to be manifested. And yet it still can be so hard to lean into that. It because you can feel worthless, and you can feel like you just dropped the ball and you didn't pursue. But even a Zen dance project, doing it for 18 years or whatever, there were seasons where nothing was happening, and then there were times where there were a ton of performances lined up, or inspiration for new dance, or not so much inspiration for new dance, and I just wanted to go rock climbing and needed a break. And I've learned it so many times, and but yet it still can. I like the other day when I came up here and I was a disaster. I'm just like, I'm struggling with that trust, that patience.
Well, I had a lovely person that I worked for, and this was a commercial photographer. And at some point I asked him, I said, I worked in the studio with him, and he was just a lovely person. He was like 6'5", and I'm 5'3", so everything in a space was set up. So like for his height, I couldn't reach the light cords. The darkroom sink came up to my chest. I mean, we were a Mutt and Jeff, but he was a lovely guy, and he was very, very matter of fact about the way he pursued what he did. Mm-hmm. And I was, in my angst moments of artist and commercial and this and that and all of, 29 or 30 or something. And he just said to me, look, it never gets easier. You just get used to it.
Yes. You just get used to it, and it gets a little less dramatic.
Yeah. It gets less painful, but it's still, you're always going to go through the cycle. You just don't care as much, and you're not as panicked about it as much. And that's kind of, now I feel that's where I've gotten to. It's like, okay, now I'm not working anymore. I don't have to do commercial work anymore. Thank goodness I'm retired. But I still do my photography, and I still, social media has kind of become an outlet for that for me, because for me, photography is a visual language, and I speak that language. It's sentences, it's words, it's structure. And one of the reasons I even got into it was because of what happened in the United States when Trump got elected. I was kind of never really much of a social media person, but I dabbled and I looked, and every now and then I visited.
I was about to ask you that, because I'm always surprised. You're pretty active, and I love your photos. I just know for myself, I've been like really kind of off social media, and I don't know. I feel like there's already so much going on, but that I can't deal. But I also really appreciate seeing your photos when I do go on, and I'm always like, oh yeah, Angie, she's out there doing it.
My approach to social media became what happened because of what was going on in the States. Mm-hmm. Because so many people I knew were so upset, panicked, worried, anticipating the worst and, what has happened and everything that was coming. And people were genuinely nervous and unhappy about it. And here I am in my life living this kind of idyllic existence,
really dreamy life,
where I'm like going down to my garden in the morning, and
you're like walking around naked if you want.
Exactly, all of that.
Views
and
of
I was just thinking, but I can, and it kind of goes back to the relationship or the experience that I had with some of my clients, where they took my work and they put it in these environments where people really needed to see that. They needed access to calm energy. And for me, it was like, okay, well, social media, there's all these people that I know from high school and whatever. I started doing a daily posting on Facebook, and I called it the Daily Nom. And what it was what happened in my garden that day. I'd make a photograph, and I would write about it. And never considered myself a writer. I know I'm a photographer. But for me, it was first of all an outlet and a way to communicate with people, because I'm kind of isolated up here. And because the responses that I was getting was, oh my God, I look forward to your post every day so that I can sit down in the morning and have my coffee. Yep. And everything was about peaceful, about energy, about positive way to live. And so for me, it became almost a public service. It was like, all this shit's going on, I'm not going to buy into it. I don't want to tie into that. I want to provide an alternative to what I see happening. And for me, it was easy because that's my daily life.
And this is what you also love, right? It's like your daily life plus your talent and knowledge. Like you said, the camera, this is Eni in the background with her stick. I don't know. She's going to just be doing that. It's okay. I mean, the tractor just came by. We're sitting on your deck. This is what's going to be happening in the background, dogs and things. Where was I going with that? Yeah, you have like the extension of your body, which is your camera. You have your art, your talent, your inspiration, and then you have your garden. It's like, it is a perfect combination. And it's like you get to do, be you, and again, be the channel, be the vessel, be kind of, observing and seeing, and then sort of, extracting and then sharing. And in my solo episode, I was talking about how one of the most important things in my life is connection. And a lot of choices I've made in my life are due to connection. When I dance, I love dancing, don't get me wrong, but I wanted to share an emotion or a piece of music and how it syncs with the movement and maybe make somebody in the audience feel something, or possibly even maybe they tear up because it's profound or something. And I did get that response often, right? And as you said, it gives back to you. That's not why you're doing it. Yes, you said it's a public service, and for sure there's something to be said about art, but it's not like the outcome is what drives it. What drives is like what comes before.
Right.
And yeah, so like I feel like for you in that situation, it's like it's a two-way street a little bit, you know?
Yeah. It is, and it's also, human beings are social animals. We are by nature creatures that need to be with other people.
Yes, we need to feel safe.
But
we need to
I
belong.
don't live around other people.
No.
I live with one other person and a cat until very recently, who sadly just passed away.
Sad.
I'm sorry, I miss my Jackie Chan.
I know.
But the beauty of what social media has to offer is connection. The downside of it is all the other shit that goes with
crap,
it.
yeah.
You know, it's so many people like, oh, don't you want to write a book, or don't you want to da-da-da? No, what I want to do is I want to post this, and I want you guys to be happy to read it. Mm-hmm. I don't need it to be anything else.
Anything but that.
And so many people are like, oh, you should write a book, you're a good writer. I'm like, no, I'm not. It doesn't, oh, yes, you are. And then after a while, I realized, actually, writing comes pretty easy. When I sit down to do these daily noms, I can just, I can start talking about the things that interest me. And I'm kind of encyclopedic in terms of how I like to gather knowledge. If something's happening and I see it, I want to know what it's about. I want to learn more about it, and I just go nuts. So people call me OCD. I am, but I just delve in. I go and I look and I read and I learn, and it interests me.
Yes.
And so because that's what my interest is, I start talking about it, and then people respond like, "Oh my God, that's so cool! I didn't know that. This is them and
this is the connection.
Yeah,
this is the connection part. This is exactly it. It's so. Just like everything you're saying, I can feel it in my heart, because I understand how, for me, for example, in the last year, I've become completely obsessed with like these breathing techniques, conscious circular breathing, and like it's really some transformative stuff. And I read about it, I learn about it, like I'm excited about it. I would like to actually become a teacher one day. And of course, then you're going to talk about it, and maybe in the process of following that thing that is also calling your attention, you get to share it with others. You get to give back in a way because you're pursuing that thing. And it doesn't matter whether it's photography, dance, a podcast, or knowledge on breath work, or yoga asanas, or your knowledge, incredible knowledge on gardening. It doesn't matter really what it is, or baking a bread.
Yeah, cooking
it's
does
not
it.
about that. It's
cooking
about,
does it too for me.
Yeah,
definitely.
cooking. It is, it's like the thing.
It's alchemy.
It's alchemy. And it could be shapes and bodies and colors and food and tastes and words. And it could be intellectual. It could be completely abstract. But it's a process. And when it's so honest, I was listening to this interview the other day, this podcast with Rick Rubin, and he was saying one of the questions, because people got to ask questions, was like, what's the biggest thing, the most important reason that people go into a quote unquote writer's block? And let's say that could be anything, not just a writer. Like writer's block meaning you are just frozen, any kind of process, creative process. And he said, judgment. First, you judge yourself.
Yeah.
And then you're scared shitless of what other people are going to think about your work. So it's like you're already a step ahead. And it was such an simple response, and I'm like, you're so right. I mean, you could go into all sorts of reasons because of this or that or deadlines. No, it has to do with the fact that you're not tapping into the actual reason that you want to be doing it, which is so much easier said than done.
Yeah,
right?
Because it sneaks in.
You're like, what are people going to think about my podcast? Am I going to this new direction? I might even do recordings in Spanish. They're going to be like, oh, fuck this. I can't understand anything. No, I'm going to make this me. And I live here now, and I'm going to do it for the right reasons. And the reason I feel inspired again to do this podcast is because ideas have come to me.
Right.
And it's because I sat and I stared.
And you sat and you let it come in. It is an incredible process the way the whole thing unfolds, because it's like part of the whole thing with the body of work that I created when I first got here that I was talking about earlier after my dad died. it got to a point at some point where I started thinking about which ones of these photos might people like. And when I got to that part with it, I knew it was time to step back.
Yes.
Because I was no longer just responding to what I was seeing. I was actually thinking, because some of the images that I like the most are not the ones that people are buying. Mm-hmm. And I started wondering, well, I should be doing more of the ones that people are, and then it's like, no, you're getting confused. Just step back. And as part of that process, that's kind of roughly around the same time that the whole thing started with like the social media thing and Facebook. And I did that for, 2 years or 2.5 years. And then I realized that Facebook had gotten to be so toxic that I didn't want to be there anymore. And I just started doing it on Instagram because Instagram is very much it's an image-oriented media more so than Facebook is. But Facebook has the advantage that you can write a much longer essay. And part of the joy of that process for me was writing and discovering that I could write. So on Instagram, it's much more curtailed, but it's still one image, and it's not necessarily every day.
Yeah, it's pretty simple.
Yeah. And I have something to say about what it is that pertains to what I think about it, and I don't care really what anybody else wants to know or cares about. If they respond, wonderful. If they don't, fine. If they can take something from that and it gives something to somebody, again, I am interacting the way I want to interact.
Yes, and you're being sincere. You're being completely congruent with your own, feelings, emotions, and intentions.
And there's not anything else being laid upon it, either by someone else or by myself. Because, we do it to ourselves really effectively. We get in our own way really, really well.
Every single day. It's so funny. I was just thinking that actually how, and I know but when you are in the creative process, no matter what stage of the process, front to back, when you tap into that, the actual reason, the actual intention, the actual true inspiration of it, things feel so much easier. Because you're just like, all I have to do is be me. Yeah. For example, the other day, in my solo podcast, I also talked about how doors are opening that I didn't even existed. Like Eve is like, please teach these yoga classes. I'm now teaching 2 yoga classes a week. And of course, there was like the initial anxiety. Like you said, we get in our own way. You're not qualified enough. You're not prepared. Your Spanish is not good enough, blah, blah, blah. So of course, the very first class that I taught, I like planned, which is, I knew I was going to do that. Like, what am I going to do? What sequences and this and that? And while I was thinking about this class, I started realizing, Isabel, just be you. You've been dancing and stretching and doing abs and exercises your whole freaking life almost now. And just be you. And so, yes, I planned a little bit, but I also was like really sincere with myself that the whole idea is that I'm not trying to be this perfect yoga instructor. I'm just going to be Isabel. And I walked into this class and I told people, like, listen, these are the things that matter to me. Here's how we're going to breathe. Always feel comfortable to close your eyes if we're in a position. I think that's a really nice way of connecting with your body. I just told them things that mattered to me. And I had a crazy freaking playlist. I mean, I played Tina Turner, and afterwards people were like, I loved your music list. That was so fun. I've never done yoga to music like that, And I started the class actually facing the mirror with them and doing like these like to this 80s song, just doing like these like weird exercises that I used to do with my abs class at the climbing gym in California, and people were having a blast. Just be you. Yeah. And this is what Stephen Dimmitt always says with a podcast. He's like, make it your own. It's yours. Just be you.
Well, you have to trust that you have something to bring to the party.
Well, and that's the problem, the self-doubt. Like Rick Rubin says, you're already judging yourself before you've even done it.
It is a human response and a reaction, and the people who don't have that, they're narcissists.
That's true.
And the people that don't have that moment of saying, do I really, seriously? They just walk through the world stepping on everything and everyone. It's okay to have that moment of saying, okay, I'm not sure, but it's also okay for you to say, but I'm going to go ahead anyway. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Because what's the worst that can happen?
Right, that somebody doesn't like my podcast or doesn't come to my yoga class.
Surgery.
Like, it's not the end of the world. And in fact, it's impossible for everybody. And it shouldn't be that everybody loves what I talk about or the class that I teach. Just like, that's not how this world is supposed to be. And I think that's the other thing about living in this village, is like such a small community, and I'm part of it with, through different ways. Obviously, as a climber, I have a lot of friends that climb. But then I also have a lot of friendships that are, at least acquaintances where it's like, it's not about climbing. And I don't know, it's just like yoga was another door, and it feels good to connect. Like you said, I think that is something, the red thread, whether it is, Ascend Dance and now the podcast and the yoga, or whatever it will become. It's like the feeling that you're giving back, I think really is an important part of being happy.
Absolutely.
Like, but contributing to the actual community that you're also part of.
Right, and you have to figure out your own path and how to do that. Like for me, it was, and I think it was 2008. It was right after my mom died. I had an opportunity here in this village because they have like a little space for like a gallery space that's next to the ayuntamiento, next to the town hall.
Oh yeah, I know which one. Yeah.
And I went and I was like, oh, maybe I could just put some of my pictures up on the wall. I went into the ayuntamiento and I asked if I could do a little exhibition, and they said yes. And so I printed up a whole bunch of stuff in the States when I had a big printer, and I brought it over here in these giant like boxes, which who knows?
Where are those photographs?
Oh, I don't know where they've gone. I mean, I don't know.
I
don't know. It doesn't.
We need stuff for our walls.
I have stuff for your walls. I can definitely hook you up.
I'm excited.
But it was like, okay, nobody in the village knows who I am. Mm-hmm. I'm not really a climber. I'm kind of a little bit older than most of the climbing community. They know I'm an American, but who is she? What does she do? Who's this person? And she's now here, and she's like stayed here, and she's with this other person, and they both live out in the middle of nowhere. Why don't they live in the village?
In the middle of nowhere.
We're these oddball people, and nobody knew who the heck I was or what I did.
They can't really place you.
Right. So I did this little exhibit, and it was open, and I went down there, and I sat there every day at the gallery, and people would wander in off the street. And a lot of the people who would wander in were actually older women, because the guys are all at the bar, and they don't go to the bar, and there's nothing for them to do in the middle of the day other than stand in the middle of the street and talk to each other, and they would wander in.
Wow.
And I didn't make friends necessarily, but I became known.
Yes.
I became a face that people now recognize on the street, that they relate to something that I do.
Yes.
And the thing that I do was something that they looked at and they thought, oh, that's kind of cool.
That's beautiful. Yeah,
and now, even all these years later, people still greet me on the street because of that one thing that I did.
Oh my God, I love this. Oh my gosh, so many thoughts. Like pata pizza. People still talk about pata pizza, and it's been years. And even within just a few classes in to teaching at Yves' studio, and now I might actually teach for Pablo in his space as well, people are stopping me and they're like, oh yeah, I heard you taught that class and people kind of liked it. And a lot of people actually showed up. I was surprised through the first class, and I got all this feedback. And I didn't think it would have an impact. And I'm walking to go see Dani, and she, lives on the other side of the village. And walking down Main Street, two people stopped me, and they're like, "Oh, I kind of want to sign up, and that sounds really cool. I feel like I need it. My knee's hurting, but they said that your class is like accessible and not super hard." And I was like, "Whoa!" Because one thing that I have felt, and this was a difficult emotion, I've been doing Ascendance for so many years. And yes, we just talked about how we're the vessel, we're not the art, we are the one who is receiving, and we know all that. But it is impossible not to say and just be honest about the fact that you become identified with where you live, what you do, that you're the artistic director, that these are your dancers, and that is also kind of your family, their chosen family. It's a whole thing. And so I moved to Spain. I decided to step back from Ascend Dance. I know it has a life of its own. Who knows? Maybe in a couple of years, suddenly I get a huge contract and I would go back for it. I don't know. But I have stepped back from that. And then you come to this village, which is what I want, but nobody has a freaking clue. Yes, a few friends have seen some videos and oh, that's really cool. But until you've actually seen it live, until you've actually experienced the dance performance of Ascendance, I think for them it's they don't really know who I am. They don't really know what I've been doing and how hard I've been working to make that happen for almost 20 years of my life, right? The ins and outs of it, how it started, how I lived in my van and then in a warehouse space in Oakland. I built my first climbing wall, and then I found people to give me old climbing holes. None of the people here get it. And like you said, they're like, who is this person? Like, she's married to somebody in our community. Yes, we kind of like her probably, and she climbs, but also like, it's like you're stripped naked, right? And so for you, it's like you're bringing what you're doing to the village. I can't do that. I've always wanted to do that. I've never been able to do a performance here in Spain. And I don't know that I will be able to. I would love to, but I don't know. So as I'm feeling kind of stripped down into this like empty space or blank canvas in my life, on top of that, I feel like people don't even really understand what I have been doing up until this point. And now I'm trying to figure out what is the next thing. So to finally feel that some things are taking shape, the yoga classes, or that my inspiration to record again is coming back. It's like, I don't know, like I'm starting to feel a little bit more direction finally.
Well, it takes time, as you know, and it takes letting go, as you know how hard. And the patience that's required has a life of its own. But look at it this way. You were just speaking about ascendance, and ascendance being something that's so much a part of who you are, and it's not known here. And yet people are stopping you on the street because you did something in a yoga class that they were not expecting. And what ascendance is, and I unfortunately have never seen a live performance, I've only seen the videos, it is the unexpected thing that you're doing in a context that people think they know something about. I know what a climbing gym is. I know what those holds are about. And what are these people doing? What? So the yoga class is, I don't know, I can't judge, but I'm projecting that it could become another expression of your ability to move in a way that is unexpected. And you can take people along with you on that ride.
Yeah.
How much fun is that?
I know, it's so fun. I'm actually really excited, and it's slowly becoming more of a positive experience in the sense of feeling less, what's the word, like capable or like qualified, a little less nervous, just more confident. There comes Eni. What did she get?
Stick.
Oh, another stick. Okay, that's great, Eni. She's so funny. She loves it up here. I mean, I do too. I think we might just move in. But no, I lost the train of thought. I was talking about...
You were talking about how it has a life of its own.
Yeah, and like how I'm starting to trust that more. And how everything is also kind of connected, because one thing I love that you just said is that all of those parts are, those are all parts of who I am, like Ascend Dance or the podcast or the yoga or movement and music. I've always loved music. I mean, I grew up playing piano. I think I have an ear for, playlists and making playlists for certain things. And so obviously picking music for my dance and things like that. So it's like, it doesn't have to be black and white. And like you said, if you take somebody on a ride, whatever the ride that is, that's connection.
And here's the thing,
right there is connection.
It will become something that does have a life of its own, and you don't know where it's going to take you.
I have no idea.
And you don't need to care about where it's going to take you.
Yes, exactly.
Right now, all you really need to do is just be with it and enjoy the fact that you have the privilege to do that now.
I know.
Because that can change later.
Yes.
And it can change at any moment.
Yeah.
And what's beautiful about doing it from this perspective is the doors that it opens for you, going back to me, because it's all about me.
Should be about you. I love your story.
What I was saying before about how the back and forth between the States and here, how being here and having that calm and having the time to think about things from a different perspective allowed me to bring things to my work that I didn't have access to when I was in the grind.
Right.
And that process brought me tangentially into things and people and relationships and work that I wasn't expecting. And sometimes those things would all come together, and the things would meet, like when I was able to sell some pieces of art to some designers who were putting it in these spaces where people are stressed. Or sometimes it would be, I'm now interested in, basket weaving, or something about gardening that I didn't know anything about. And it all came about because, I was talking to this person because they were asking me how I lived in Spain while I was at their house shooting interiors for them. And they were curious. And we started talking about something completely different. And then I would discover something that person knew that would bring something into my life that I would then get curious to want to explore more about. And that relationship, that's the interpersonal part of relationships with human beings that I kind of miss up here because we're isolated, but I get from my social media interactions, because my social media interactions are not about selling anything or likes or wanting. I don't give a Can I curse? I don't give a fuck about how many people follow me or listen to what I have to say.
Yes.
The people that I have cultivated relationships with on social media are people that genuinely want to know what I'm about on a day-to-day basis, and I'm interested in what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's a relationship.
Yep.
Full
and
stop.
it's like a perfect medium because for you as a photographer, I mean, this is like it fits so well, right? It's like that is. And it's perfect because it's like you don't actually have to make tons of effort to be able to share and connect on that level.
The media is very conducive to what I do.
Yeah.
It fits.
Absolutely.
But, other things also fit. I mean, I love cooking. And, I go through phases where I'm just too freaking exhausted as I'm doing a bunch of other things. And the garden needs this. And now we're building the chicken house. And, the cars aren't working.
That's the one thing that we wanted to talk about, the living on the land and the different projects.
Yeah, I mean, we live on a farm. It never ends. It never ends. There's always something.
But you were just telling me earlier that it's always a great excuse to be outside. So
But I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm saying it's a constant thing.
It's a constant
and
thing,
sometimes
and it is,
it's overwhelming.
Yes, absolutely.
And I feel so sorry for my poor partner because he's bought all these vehicles, and every single vehicle that he's purchased is old, and every single old vehicle that he has is constantly needs attention. And so, these vehicles are great because they help on the farm, and he enjoys the work, and he's learned to be a crack mechanic from knowing absolutely zip about it. 20 years ago, knew nothing about mechanics, and now he could go into business, but he's not gonna because he's a mechanic at home right now. But all these things are constantly vehicles. And so, we think, we could probably afford to buy a new vehicle. But the bottom line is we don't want a new vehicle because the older ones, if you can keep them running, they're so much better than the junk that's on the market now.
Yeah.
And so, it takes effort.
Yeah.
But God, is it worth it?
It's so beautiful. I mean, I dream of having a piece of land here one day, as you know. I've been kind of just keeping my eyes open to possibilities. Ini's licking you like crazy right now.
This
is so
it.
adorable. She's like, just let me just do that and distract you a little bit. Yeah, the projects and being outside and working on nesting. I think for me, as I have been transitioning here over the last months, and, definitely having moments of like, what am I doing and what direction do I want to go? And I think the nesting, and I wonder how your experience is because you have now decided to be here full time, and that's pretty recent as well. If you agree with me that the nesting part, the projects, and for me, obviously, it's a house. So it's not like land, but still tons of stuff, tons of projects, tons of things that you can be doing and adding and changing and painting and plants on the terrace and whatnot. It's like such an essential part, I feel like, of being in a place where you can then even access the art, the thing. Because I know that, it has been a little bit of a challenging transition in the sense of like not really knowing where I'm going. And as things are coming, or falling into place and taking shape, I am also noticing like I really did give a lot of time, love, and energy into nesting and landing.
Yeah, some people don't need that. I have always needed a home base. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's because I grew up with my dad, being a foreign service, and we were foreign service people, and we would like constantly be moving, and I would never feel like home was someplace that was permanent.
Yeah.
Like it was someplace that I first of all could create for myself and then enjoy for myself. Mm-hmm. And you've lived, you've lived the van life. You've lived a whole bunch of different ways.
And all sorts of different places and ways, and yes.
But creating an environment for yourself that allows you the space, not only physically, but also emotionally and mentally.
Yes.
To be able to have the peace you need when you need it. Cook a meal that you want to eat when you want it. I mean, it's privilege, but it's something that we can give to ourselves.
It's so nourishing.
And it's so important.
Yes.
And depending on your personality, I think you and I are very similar that way. I need that for my well-being.
Yes. Yeah.
I know that.
Yeah.
And so for me, coming back and forth all these years, even when I wasn't here, I would be creating the same thing for myself there. Mm-hmm. And since I've sold that house and I've basically let go of pretty much everything except for, I have a little place at my sister's house where I can be when I go back to the States. But this is now home.
Yeah.
And it's always been that both places were home. And now it's fine for me to have let go of that home because I have this and this is now full-time. And now I can start thinking about these things that I want to do that I hadn't had time to do before. So now I'm gonna be able to do this, or I'm gonna be able to do that.
Yeah, it's like focus, energy. I hear you because I sold the apartment in Lafayette. Now it's been a while. Actually, that was like right after COVID or something like this. And then we had all these plans of maybe buying some land in Grand Junction or whatnot. Never happened. I still have the van. That's all we have in the storage unit. And so, for me, all of it kind of like made sense. I'm like, we have a place in Spain. Mm-hmm. And that is a house that I call home now, and I want to nest, and there's my opportunity for nesting.
You said something very important a little while ago, and I just want to bring you back to it. You said something about plants on the terrace. Mm-hmm. And I've got all kinds of cuttings that I can give you.
Please,
of all sorts of succulents that you can put out there because that way,
I
mean, the succulents are going to be great for your terrace because they're low maintenance, they're beautiful, they don't need a whole bunch of water.
All the plants, please.
And I have so many things to give you.
Oh my God, I'm so excited that you just brought that up. That and the photography and oh my gosh,
yeah, I mean, you're talking and you said plants and my ears go bing.
Yes, I know. And it's so
plants?
funny because I'm just now getting to that point because there have been all these other things that were maybe quote unquote more important within the house.
Plus, we're just coming out of winter.
Plants, we're getting coming out of winter, but plants make such a difference in
it's
your life.
I don't think I've shown you my greenhouse. We're going to look later after we finish.
We're gonna have to. Well, yeah, we have to wrap it up. I mean, I feel like I could just record like 5 hours with you and we'll just have to do another episode at some point.
Well, the beauty is you can always edit this down to whatever makes sense for this particular.
But I don't want to cut anything out. It was all so good. It's juicy, and I feel like it is so many things. But I guess one of the things to wrap it up that I was gonna ask you had to do a little bit with that transitioning from the back and forth to now being here. Did you have expectations on what it would feel like? And I know it hasn't been that long yet, but and so far. Have they been that? Have they been different? Like, what has the experience like for I'm talking also for myself because I feel like emotionally it was a very different experience coming here, knowing like I am now making this my home base.
I think for me it was first of all, it took a lot longer. I've been at this for 23 years, the back and forth. And so for me, it was clearly time. Mm-hmm. So for me, the transition didn't feel like, it's a big change because I had already been in the process of letting go what was there for a while, like 4 or 5 years or maybe more.
Right.
Slowly unwinding from all of the things that I had, all the attachments that I had. And in conjunction with how things were going back there, how crazy stuff was getting, how the rise of fascism, people hating each other.
And shootings, just like arms everywhere. Yeah,
so
much violence.
Yeah,
I know. That was one of the things that pulled me to come here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, no place is completely free of violence, but you don't have to have it in your face every single day.
Yeah,
and you don't
or just
have
like weapons on the streets everywhere.
And the general acceptance of people to that life being the way they're living because they either can't do anything about it or they agree with it. It's ill. It is sick. It's a sickness. So for me, that process of coming here was relief. It was like, okay, I can put these things down now because, I'm 66 years old. I have done enough time working. I'm perfectly capable of retiring. I have saved my money like a little pack rat.
Yeah.
I have been very frugal and lived way below my means for the past 20-some years so that I could have this.
Yeah.
And the reason I did that is because I knew 20-some years ago that, first of all, I had discovered what enough looked like for me. Mm-hmm. and that was going to be fine, and that you can only sort of plan for the worst and hope for the best. And planning for the worst doesn't mean you get obsessive about collecting more and more and more because you've already figured out what enough looks like.
Yeah.
So if you've got that balance sort of set, and it's not to say that shit can't go wrong. It always can fly off the handle. Things can always just completely, a rock can fall in this house. Anything can happen. But you can't control that anyway, so why worry about it? I've stopped worrying about all the things I can't control. Not that I don't worry still, but to the extent that I used to not be able to sleep at night. I was so focused on making sure that we were going to be safe. And now it's like, okay, I'm safer here than I am back there because I can't afford to live there. I can't afford health insurance there. I don't have enough money to survive in that environment.
And that's such a big thing is just the lifestyle here is so different in that sense. Like you
just
don't
need
feel
as much.
exposed and you don't need as much and there is more support. And not just within the system, but also within the community.
Yeah.
And it just feels like you're not just out there just the wolves are going to go get you. It's it feels very exposed, very vulnerable when you're in the U.S. for so many reasons. And it's just really expensive.
Well, and also, frankly, health insurance and health services, the fact that I can here afford health insurance and if something happens to me, I am covered. And that the perspective that people have on people being taken care of is that it's a right, not something you have to scrounge for and beg to have, even though you're spending, back in the States, I would be spending $1,500 a month on health insurance and still have to, a deductible, and still have to beg for any kind of health care. If anything were to happen to me, I'd still have to be justifying and going through all kinds of hoops with, I had been there before. When I first started having health issues and I needed things here that I'm paying for by having health insurance, I would be afraid to ask the doctor for something. And my partner, who's used to a system where people, are entitled to these things, was just ask. If you can have it, they'll do it. And this is what happened with part of my hip surgery. It's one of my legs I had both of my hips done. One of my legs after the first surgery was a little bit longer than the other because, of course, they've rebuilt a new joint, so it's going to be because the other one's worn out. And I said it. I was like, oh, do I say anything? I said it to the doctor, and he's like, yeah, well, let's take a look. And he's like, oh, okay, I'll order this test and that test, and we'll take care of it. And I was like, oh my God, you mean I don't have to beg? Or you mean I don't have to jump through 50 hoops and call 20 different people and have it be denied and then have to go through some process of, no, it's okay. We'll take care of it.
It's such a different, I know, it's such a different feeling. And I think that's the overarching experience that I'm having. And yes, I have my moments where I'm still trying to find my way. And like you said, things take time. But in general, the overarching theme for me, the feeling is I feel safe.
Yeah.
I feel held. I walk around the village. I run into friends that I know. The owners of the butcher and the vegetable shop know me. You walk in, people support you. It feels, the healthcare system, just everything. I feel more safe. And it's really a great sensation to be living here.
Smaller communities tend to be that way because you don't have the anonymity to be cruel to somebody without them having to be face to face with you.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I don't like about social media is that anonymity where people can just start being horrible to each other.
Yeah.
And that's the reason I left Facebook because I had connected with some people from a long time ago and I was like, these people are horrible people. I knew them in high school and I haven't talked to them in 20 years and there's a reason. or 50 years or however long it's been. So, that stuff, I started to realize how a small community can be and how taken care of people can be with one another. It's not to say that there aren't assholes. Of course,
no, of course. No, nothing is perfect. Everything comes with its ups and downs, right? I was talking about that too. Living in a small village, I think I mentioned this in my solo episode, just sometimes you want to be anonymous. Sometimes you do want to have the stimulus. Sometimes you do want to, and you can go get that. But every place has its ups and downs and its pros and cons. But everything you said about the small community, I think, to wrap it up, because we could keep going.
We're never going to wrap this up.
We're not going to, so we're going to wrap it up. We're going to force ourselves to wrap it up. But this small community, it sounds like to me that you have settled in well and you've enjoyed the process of making this your full time.
Yeah. And we have this advantage in that we are part of this community, but not part of this community. So all of the gossip and all of the that does happen in small communities. We're exempt because we're so far off the beaten track.
This is why I need to buy some land and just
people
hide
can
out.
talk about us, but there's no relationship
but it doesn't
to
matter,
us.
So it
they
doesn't
can make
matter.
shit up because people can always make shit up.
Well, actually, you would be surprised because every time I come to visit you, people are like, "Ooh, you're going to Angie's." Like it's like this mystery person. And I have the honor to be your friend, and I get to walk up here into the Montsant.
Well,
and
I've never been anything but welcoming to anybody. And I've, had some people up to my house, but nobody's ever reciprocated. And maybe culturally that's not what they do. So I figure, well, if I invite you to my house and I cook you a nice meal and we have a good time and you don't ask me to your house, maybe you're not interested.
Yeah, people do get it in the little ways in that village down there. There's definitely that.
And it's fine by me to be able to walk down and say hi and have a lovely conversation with Magdalena and see Mali on the street and have something to say to her. And, on my social media, there's a couple of people that follow me that are from here. And I've started on Instagram because I'm on Instagram and I've left Facebook way behind, that toxic cesspool. But on Instagram, I've now started posting in both English and Spanish. And I decided I think a year and a half ago that I wanted to have both languages represented. I can't do it in Catalan because I don't speak enough Catalan. But, now I'm saying things in two languages because I want to be able to have the people that I interact with socially on my social media be able to understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's kind of how I feel about my podcast. And I was telling Steven, I think I'm going to start doing some Spanish recordings. And then some people will understand and some people won't. And some English ones people will understand or not. But it's just, making yourself kind of, connecting to the communities that you're part of and just being honest about who you are.
It's also been kind of cool for me because once I started posting in Spanish, I've had some people say to me, "Oh my God, it's so cool that I have the English and the Spanish because it helps me with my English."
It's so nice. I know I did that in my yoga class the other day because I had Spanish speaking students and then a few students from, there was a couple from Norway, and then I had a German person in class one. So anyway, I would go back and forth between English and Spanish and was like, this is a great challenge and it's really fun and everybody's learning something. So it's a win-win. Well, I'm going to cut us off because I know we could just go on forever.
Yeah,
and this has been so wonderful, Angie. I really appreciate it. I love you so much and I'm so grateful to have you in my life here.
I'm looking forward to having more time with you because I don't have that many people that I interact with on a daily basis.
I feel very honored. So thanks so much. I love you.
Love you too.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Big hug, abrazos und bis bald.